Last week, we ended chapter 4. Okay, and here's a quick overview of chapter 4. It's only a godly wisdom that can help us overcome all sorts of disagreements and jealousy and create in us a pure and humble heart. That's 2 weeks ago. And then by God's grace, okay, it's only God's grace that keeps us on the race when we give in to our sinful desires. We saw too that we will succeed when we let the Lord orchestrate our plans. Remember, we were talking about the text of you can't really plan. We don't know for sure what's going to happen tomorrow, but we have to ask if the Lord wills, we will do this or we'll do that. We talked about the idea of we're not just living in the moment, but living in that line of eternity. What we're doing today really matters where we're going to spend eternity. That's just kind of bringing you up to speed where we have been. Now we're going to chapter 5. You can open your Bibles to James chapter 5. We're going to go through verses 1 through 12. And then next week I'm going to finish the chapter, and then we'll be done with the book of James. Okay, and then we'll start on a new series. James 5, verses 1 through 12. You can follow along in your Bibles, and you can follow along on the screen as well. James starts chapter 5 with an exhortation. It's an exhortation against the rich for the way they have mishandled their wealth and have wronged their workers from their wages. And then he turns to the laborers, the believers who are being taken advantage of, the poor, and he pleads with them to be patient in suffering and to trust that God, the only righteous judge, to vindicate them. So let's read the passage, 1 through 6, James chapter 5. It says this, "Come now, you rich." And let me pause for a moment before you discard this message because you think maybe it's not for me, it's not talking to me, I'm not rich. I am not either, so I thought I'm off the hook. But then I did some more digging and some more reading, and then I read this really interesting statistics. Richard Stearns, he's the president of World Vision, in his book, The Hole in Our Gospel, he lists a survey which reveals that if you earn $25,000 or more annually, you are in the top 10% of the world's income earners. Okay? $25,000 or more, you are in the top 10%. So for some people in the world, you are really, really rich. Right? So in other words, even if you wish you had more, even if you wish you made more, maybe you're not considered, if you compare it to other people, we are really considered rich to the world's standards. Just to pause and to say, okay, the message that we're listening to today is applicable to all of us. And James is writing to a particular group of people, and we'll get to it in a moment, but just don't tune off, okay? "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you." So the way James starts verse 1 clearly points to the seriousness of the issue at hand. It's a big, loud exhortation. He is calling the unrighteous rich to mourn because of what awaits them. James's confrontational words are actually prophetic language that refer to the day of the Lord, the day of the final judgment. And they shouldn't be taken lightly. So though the rich that he is writing to, they are most likely landowners who were attending church but not believers. He mentions them in chapter 2 as well. The message, I believe, is still applicable. It's still a timely warning to the church at large. James knew that the natural human tendency to envy the rich has the potential to lead many Christians astray, doesn't it? So he's warning them, and this warning helps steer them and us away from desiring such a thing. Injustice will not be left unpunished by God, he's saying. The Lord has heard the cries of the workers who are being exploited, and there's severe judgment coming. A judgment that will cause them to weep and howl. God will vindicate the poor and judge the rich for the way they mishandled their wealth. Their wealth increased at the expense of not properly paying the workers. I read this news recently about a man in Australia. He went to work and he was not given food. He was not given any pay for his work, and he was starving. He was found, and then this big news report came, and this is still happening today. A judgment will come to those who are mismanaging the wealth and mistreating and exploiting the poor. They were committing fraud against them. They stored up far beyond what was necessary, and they began to waste it. And how we see that starts in verse 2. It says, "Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten." Imagine that. They have so much, and it's just going to waste. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. I met a man one time that I went to his house, and he had bags of money everywhere in the garage, and you go into the living room and you're stepping over bags of money that he had. You laid up treasures in the last days. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. And that's pretty sad, isn't it? Imagine how it made them feel as they read James's words. I would assume it caused them to at least pause and reflect on their condition. They were rich, filthy rich. They had status and power. They achieved their life goals, perhaps, at least from an earthly wisdom perspective. But they were living in the moment for the moment. They were hoarding wealth. They were exploiting the poor. They were self-ambitious. And everything they had accumulated was not enough to spare them from God's judgment. James' reproach to the rich is not concerning how much money they have, and this is where it's really important for us to understand. The footnote on my Bible clearly puts it this way: James proclaims the worthlessness of riches, not the worthlessness of the rich. Today's money will be worthless when Christ returns. So we should spend our time accumulating the kind of treasures that will be worthwhile in God's eternal kingdom. Let me say it again. Money was not the issue, and it is not the issue. There's various examples in the Bible that people who had wealth, and it's not against having money. In fact, we all need money to survive. The problem lies in loving money. That's what 1 Timothy 6:10 says. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. James is aiming at those rich landowners who gained their wealth in an ungodly manner and made it the center of their lives. They were controlled by the money. They loved money to the point of taking advantage and doing anything possible to get more. Throughout the book, James, if you stop to read it more intentionally, you will see that he is echoing Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And listen to how Jesus uses some of the very same language in Matthew 6:19 through 21. It's on the screen. It says this, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Let me ask you, are you laying up treasures on earth? In other words, are you putting your trust in worthless things that are temporary? Are you spending most of your energy and resources focusing on the small portion of time that you get to enjoy while on this earth? Or are you living with eternal perspective in all that you do, living on mission for Christ? For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So if you want to know where your treasure is, here's an idea. Okay, check your bank statement. Print out a 3-month statement and go through it, line items, all right? I think it will help you identify what you value the most. It's just a good indication to see what you're really interested in. What are your priorities? Where your heart is really set. And I'm not saying this as a way of pointing the finger and judging, because I want to do the same and look at where are we going. And you will see it's my kids and family. And so I'm just saying it gives you a good idea. It's an indication of what we value the most. How many times did you eat out this month? How much money have you given to missions? How much money have you given to the poor? How are you investing your resources and what God has given you? It will just give you a good indication of what your priorities are. Toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." The hearts of the rich landowners were corrupted, and they were getting richer at the expense of oppressing their workers. They were storing up money, and James's rebuke to them echoes Jesus' story of the rich fool in Luke 12. Remember, the rich man's land produced a very large crop, and he decided to tear down his barns and build bigger ones to store and his extra grain. And then he wanted to take life easy and to eat and drink and have a good time, right? And then God said to him, "You foolish man, tonight I'll take your life away from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? Are you living in the moment, planning for today, not knowing what tomorrow holds? Where is your heart really set?" These people had embraced worldly wisdom instead of letting their way of thinking be completely changed by adopting God's standards. So I find this passage again to be a warning to all of us. It causes us to reflect on our possessions as well. Are we being good stewards of the Lord's gifts to us? Are we being generous with the people in need? Do we trust that God can continue to provide even if you gave above and beyond you think you should be giving? Because to be a good steward is to manage well what is given you, but to trust that He is good to provide means you are completely open and surrendered everything you have to Him. Are we being generous? Are we giving towards the mission of the local church you are part of? Those of you who are business owners, are you being fair to your employees and paying them on time? I worked with a guy one time, and it was incredible. I mean, he had the money to pay. He says, I'm just going to wait until next week. And he knew he could, and then comes next week, he says, I'm just going to wait one more week. They can wait a little longer. And he was a guy who said he loved the Lord and he wanted to follow Christ. If you haven't managed your finances well, I think this is an opportunity for us to reflect upon it and to repent and to turn and to start making amendments. Don't let your riches rot and your silver and gold corrode. That's what the text is saying to us. The decisions you make today will determine where and how you will spend eternity. Are you living today in view of eternity? Be faithful in what God has given you. Then he makes a turn, and then he turns his attention to the believers who are the ones being oppressed. I was going to stop the text in two parts, and I decided to try to cover all of it, and we'll just keep going. So 7 through 12, you can open your Bibles there. 7 to 12, you follow along in here as well. But he turns his attention to those who are being oppressed, okay? Those who we heard in the text, in the verses just a little earlier, that they were the ones who were not getting paid, okay? He says this, be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. He's watching. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remained steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. But above all, my brothers, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under condemnation. The theme of the verses here is patience. James begins with an encouragement, followed by an exhortation, and then he ends with an illustration of patience in the midst of suffering in the life of Job and the prophets. Those who are being oppressed by the rich are encouraged to be patient until the coming of the Lord. When the Lord returns, injustice will be no more. He will vindicate them. But I can only imagine how challenging it must have been to hear these words. Because the most natural response a person who's being oppressed wants to hear is for it to end quickly and for justice to be made right away, isn't it? Imagine you're in the middle of just this big oppression, and then you get a letter that says, hey, be patient. Be patient. Just wait. But if you recall the theme of the book, if you recall James chapter 1, the testing of our faith produces what? Steadfastness. That's how the Lord works and refines and shapes and molds us. It is like the refining of a silversmith does to silver. Remember, the heat brings up all the impurities. It's in the suffering and the pain and the testing and the trials that God is heating up. And then all of it is coming up, and he cleans it, and then he does it again, and he's working, and he's allowing suffering in our lives so that our faith might be tested or purified until we are fully mature, and our reflection is that of Jesus. Be patient. Once again, he's telling them. If you look at Romans 5, 4 through 6, it says, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame. Okay, let me say it again. Your suffering is producing something, and it will make you either bitter or better. God wants us to be better. He wants to make us better, so it's producing endurance, and endurance produces character. We become more like Christ, and character produces hope. Hope in the one who is good and he is faithful. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. The illustration of the farmer who waits for the fall and spring rains highlights the significance of patience. It takes time, doesn't it, for the soil to be germinated and for the fruit to grow. It takes time for those things to happen in our lives as well. It points out also to the fact that man cannot speed up God's timing. We cannot cause rain, and only God can do that. God is the one who sends the rain, and he does so in his perfect timing. The same is true on how he works in our lives. We sang earlier that God is working in our waiting. He is sanctifying us. He's teaching us to trust beyond our understanding. Can you believe that and receive that? God's plans are still to prosper. He has not forgotten us. He's faithful forever. He's perfect in love. He is sovereign over us. God is sovereign over us. Can we say amen to that? Then James moves to an exhortation. Verse 9, he says, do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. Remember the quarrels and fights and how the tongue was being misused? James is saying, stop complaining about each other. To grumble against each other is a sin. Be patient with each other. I don't know how many times we say these words around my house to my kids. Kids, stop complaining about each other. Relax. Just be patient. He didn't mean to do that. Let me say it to us as the body of Christ. There will be times we might have different opinions about a certain issue, but we're playing on the same team. I always do this illustration when I do marital counseling, husband and wife and all the conflict resolution and all that. And I say, do you guys realize you're playing on the same team? If one scores, the other one wins as well, right? It's not like, hey, I kicked it. No. If you score, the couple wins. We are playing on the same team. We're living for the cause of Christ together. Stop the grumbling, he's saying. Love each other and respect each other well. Let's be a people who use our words for God's glory and as a witness and a testimony of the wonders of His love and the saving power of His grace. He's standing at the door. He is watching. When you start complaining, He's like, what are you talking about? I know you. It's right there. Stop the grumbling. And then He returns to the theme of suffering, patience in suffering. If you remember the story of Job, God allowed him to be afflicted by the devil. He lost his children, he lost his wealth, and he became severely ill. The Bible tells us that he was afflicted with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. He took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. And James uses his example to encourage the believers who were being oppressed. Okay, remember this story of Job? They go, what? But you know why? Because they knew the end of the story. It was an encouragement to them because they knew how the story ended. They knew that God met Job in his brokenness, and He does the same for you and I. Job endured pain and suffering, and in the end, the Lord revealed Himself as compassionate and merciful. I love how the book ends, Job 42. It says, then Job answered to the Lord, and he said, I know that you can do all things. I've tasted, I've went through it, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak, I will question, and you make it known to me. And then he says, I had heard of you by hearing of ear, but now my eyes see you. And then it says, the Lord restored the fortunes of Job and blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning. It required patience in the suffering. Those who remain steadfast are considered blessed. Not those who start well, but those who finish well. Earlier in the book, chapter 1, verse 12, James says, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love Him. I believe what God was saying to them is a universal truth that we all need to hear, to be reminded of as well this morning. And here's a biblical promise that you and I can look forward to with anticipation. I want you to just listen. It's not on the screen. You can please just maybe even close your eyes for a moment. But this is, I don't know what you are going through, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form minimizing suffering. I've been through it, not to the extent that Job and many of you perhaps have. I know there's hurting in this room. I know there's suffering. I know there are challenges that we all face. So this is not to take away the weight and the heaviness and the difficulty that you probably might be experiencing, but this is just to encourage us this morning. Perhaps some of us have to hear this and be reminded of that again. Revelation 21 says this, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, The dwelling place of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and He will be His people. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them as their God. And here's verse 4. It says, He will wipe away tears from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And He who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. This is the promise for us. You and I also need to be encouraged today in the fact that Jesus will indeed return, and He will make all things new. There will be no more suffering, no more pain, no more oppression, no more inequality, no more sickness. But until then, we are to wait patiently on the Lord. God's promises are true. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. God's grace is sufficient, and His power is made perfect in our weakness. Stand firm and know that He is God. His timing is perfect. He's faithful to the end. Would you stand with me? This next song is an invitation to leave all your burdens on the altar. It says, are you hurting and broken within? Are you feeling overwhelmed? I want you to hear Jesus' invitation. The Father's arms are open wide. He offers forgiveness. He offers strength. He offers hope.